Hey guys, so you just watched a video of Khan Academy going over bank balance sheets, whether things are assets, liabilities, and I wanted to go over this worksheet with you, and you can do it along with me. It's basically the key, so you can see it along with me, and I just wanted to show you how you think about these types of questions. I don't. I hope the bank balance sheet will not be on the official FRQ of this year, but you always, expect the best but prepare for the worst, and bank balance sheets. Bleh. So here's the first scenario. Your worksheet looks something like this. So you can add a table or you can print it out and draw a table, a little T-chart basically. I made it easier by actually making an insert table, and you can fill things out. But so you can follow along with me, and basically the first scenario is a bank decides to start up with the following. They sell stock ownership in the bank and receive $250,000 of stock. I need to erase the word capital because it's not capital stock, it's just stock. Capital stock would be like pizza ovens. Where am I going? Okay, and they spend $200,000 on property and building and equipment. So basically this bank opens up, their stockholders basically give them $250,000 as to own the bank. And with all this money, with all the stockholders' money, they buy the bank, the equipment, couches, all the stuff that you need in bank. And for assets, well, the property is money that is like property that they own. The bank owns the property, and it's $200,000 of property. Of course, those stockholders can take back their money anytime and sell their share. So that $250,000 of stock that was sold to the stockholders, that's a liability because technically, the stockholders can ask for that back. So that's money that this bank can potentially owes the stockholders. The property is something that it owns. They could sell the property to pay back the stockholders. And they have $50,000 of extra money, just extra. So whenever we have extra money, we just throw that into excess reserves. Excess reserves are just extra cash on hand that doesn't earn any interest, but it's also not like a liability. It's just extra cash. So any extra excess reserves, that's going to be at the very end. So if you scroll down, excess reserves is always done last because that's your balancing. And so that's our first step is done because we did the $250,000 of stock is in the liabilities. We spent $200,000 on property. We just kept the extra in reserves. The next scenario, same bank, same problem, is the bank receives a deposit of $100,000 from their very first customer. The required reserve ratio is 10%. So everything that didn't change, you just drag on down. The stock didn't change. The scenario didn't say anything about the stock or the property. And so you leave those alone. I'm not going to change excess reserves just yet because that's the last thing we change. Okay, so that bank deposit of $100,000 goes in our liability side because, well, first off, that's money that we owe a customer. The main liability of banks is the money that they owe their customers, the people that bank there. They can ask for that money back. It's theirs. And so that is deposits are always a liability. Of course, it's money that the bank now has. Of course, they don't stick all of that deposit into excess reserves. The required reserve ratio is 10%, meaning 10% of the deposit, which was the $100,000 deposit, 10% of it is now kept in required reserves, and the rest of it can be thrown in excess reserves. Well, $10,000 is 10% of $100,000. So $10,000 is taken out of this deposit, put in required reserves. Can't touch that money. It's required by the Federal Reserve to have 10% in the bank at all times, and that's 10% of $100,000. And then the rest of it, the other $90,000 of this deposit, where does it go? Well, it goes into excess reserves. And the reason that excess reserves is now $140 is that there was 50 previous from the previous question, and we added 90. So basically, we took that deposit and we split it. 10% of it goes into required reserves. The other 90% goes into excess reserves. So notice how these are still balanced. On one side, you total it up to $350,000. On the other side, it's $350,000. All right. The next question says, this bank lends out now as much as possible and is said to be fully loaned up. That's just what it means to be fully loaned up, is you do loan out as much as possible. Well, look at our previous question. How much money can they loan out? They can't loan out property. They can't loan out what's required to be kept in the bank at all times. What they can loan out is whatever's in excess. That is how banks know how much money they can loan out, and that's how they can control money supply, by determining how much money is in excess, how much money is extra that the banks have access to for loans. So they loan it all out, all $140,000. So our excess reserves goes down to zero because we loan it all out, but that loan, that $140,000 of loans, stays on the asset side, because a loan that a bank gives to a customer is money that they own. They can call back that customer and be like, give me my money back. You owe me my money. So that's still under the asset side. And even if it, let's say you pretended, you got confused and you put it on the liability side, our bank sheet would not be balanced anymore, because it'd be, $140,000 more on one side than the other. That's not going to balance. So remember, they have to stay equal on both sides. And so the property stayed the same, stock deposits stayed the same, the required reserves stayed the same, but that excess reserves was taken away, and now it's called loans. And now we have nothing in excess. The next question says, that customer who had deposited $100,000 writes a check for $50,000. The bank decides to borrow $100,000 from the Fed rather than call on his loans. They can clear the check. Okay. What hasn't changed? Property didn't change. The stock didn't change. That $400,000 loan, that didn't change, because it just says, rather than calling its loans, they're going to do something else. So that $140,000 loan from the previous question, that stayed the same. So this, and this did not change. But it says the customer who deposited $100,000, this person right here that deposited $100,000, they write a check for $50,000. So they go to the bank and they take out $50,000, and it's gone, which means $50,000 is left in their account. Well, how did the bank pay them? How did the bank, they have nothing in their vault. In the previous question, we drained excess reserves. So that's usually if you were to withdraw money from the bank, that's where they would get it from. They would get it from the vault, but there isn't any. We just loaned it all out. So to cover this check from the customer, the bank decides to borrow $100,000 from the loan, from the Fed. They are going to, we ran out of money. Let's get one of those bricks trucks to swing on by and bring us some money. And that's a loan from the Fed. So the $50,000 was taken out, leaving only $50,000 left, which means the required reserves changed, because the required reserves is a fraction of deposits, and deposits just changed. It went from $100,000 to $50,000. The percentage is still the same. It's still 10%, but it's now 10% of a different number. So instead of $10,000 that was in the required reserves before, now there only has to be $5,000, because the other amount can be freed up. And the loan from the Fed is a liability. They took out a loan from the Fed of $100,000 so they could give 50 of it to the customer. And that's liability for this bank, because now that's it's money that they owe the Fed. They took out a loan from the Fed, which is why the loan's here. The question is, why is excess reserves $55,000? Okay, here's how I can, I don't know what my thing. This one's always a tricky question that people always have trouble with. Let's kind of look at, I'm going to ignore property, stock, and that $140,000 of loans. That didn't change. I'm just going to write it was $100,000 in deposits. We had $10,000 previously in the previous question, $10,000 in required reserves and $0 in excess reserves. Okay. So the customer who borrowed money or who deposited money, assets, liabilities. The customer who had deposited $100,000, they come back and they ask for 50 of it back. So we give them 50, which leaves them 50 back. Well, where do we get that 50? We took out a loan from the Fed of $100,000. Fed loan. So from this $100,000, 50 of it went to this customer. Goodbye, customer. See you later. We gave you your money. We took out a $100,000 loan. We gave you 50 of it, which means 50, the rest of that loan, the rest of this Fed loan goes into excess reserves. But how do we get 55 in excess reserves is our answer? Isn't it just 50? Well, no, because remember, if deposits changed, so does required reserves. And we only need to keep 10% of this number in required reserves at all times, which is not 10,000, it's 5,000. So we leave 5,000 there of that 10, and where does the other 5,000 go? It's freed up. It goes into excess reserves. So that's why we have 55 there. 50 of it came from the extra loan that we took from the Fed, and the other 5,000 came from the money that was freed up from required reserves because demand deposits changed. It's kind of a tongue tie. It's a bank balance sheets are no one's friend. It's just like a puzzle of where money is, where money goes, and and how much. Okay. This next question says, it's the same scenario. The bank now receives $200,000 from a new customer. So remember, we had $50,000 in deposits. Well, now we have a new deposit of $200,000 for a grand total of $200,000 in deposits. Look, the stock stayed the same. The $100,000 Fed loan stayed the same. Property stayed the same. Even this loan from a long time ago stayed the same. But we now have a $200,000 deposit. Well, if deposits change, required reserves change. Required reserves is 10% of this number. 10% of $250,000 is $25,000. And all of that extra goes into excess reserves. Why is it 235? Well, we had, did I erase excess reserves here? There we go. Excess reserves was 55,000. There was already 55,000 there. And so when that person deposited 250,000, or actually they deposited 200,000, 50,000 was already there. When they deposited 200,000, 90% of it went to excess reserves, 10% of it went into required reserves of that 200,000. 10% is 20,000. So 20,000 gets put in required reserves. There was already 5,000 there. Now we're adding 20,000 more because that's 10% of 200,000. And that's why this is now 25, because it was 5 and now we added 20,000 more. And the other $180,000 of $200,000 gets put into excess reserves. There was 55 already there, but if we add 180 to the 55 that's already there, you're going to get $235,000 of just extra money. Now this bank decides to buy bonds from the Fed. They have all this money. Look how much excess reserves they have. They've just got a lot of cash sitting around, and they probably want to, they're a business. They want to make some money. So they're like, let's buy a bond from the Fed and earn some interest. And so how can they pay for this bond? They pay for it with all their excess reserves. Stocks stayed the same. That loan from the Fed stayed the same. Deposits didn't change in this problem. Neither did property, neither did loans. Required reserves stayed the same because deposits stayed the same. So the required reserves were only going to change if deposits changes. But $150,000 of bonds is now on the asset side because a bond is an asset. It's a way to make money, something that you own. And where did they get that $150,000 to pay for it? From excess reserves. So $150,000 goes taken away from excess and puts into a new category now of bonds. It's not excess reserves anymore. It's a $150,000 bond. And excess reserves goes down to 85. And last part, the customer who borrowed $100,000 So that loan from before, they borrowed it. Well, here it is. There's a loan from before. They borrowed $140,000, but they're paying off $100,000 of that loan. They're not paying all of it. They're paying $100,000 off of $140,000. That leaves $40,000 left. But where does this extra money go? That they paid off the money, like they paid off the loan. It goes into excess reserves. So you paid off your loan. There's less in loans of $100,000 and more into excess reserves. Don't put it in required. Required only changes if there's a deposit. This person is not depositing. There's just extra cash in the vault. So I know it's a little complicated, it's a little wordy, but we're going to be doing a little bit of practice, like one more little FRQ practice just to show you how it works. But this is bank balance sheets, a little bit of stock, a little bit of like assets, liabilities, who owns what, how much, where's it coming from. It's a whole little puzzle. At the end of the day, it's not difficult. It's just a little bit tedious. Anyway, have a great day, and I will see you later.